I take away from this meeting the need to have a better definition of who decides. There's a doctor in Quebec named Jacques Dunnigan who's always trotted out by the Chrysotil Institute, because he will affirm in front of any microphone, in front of any hall, that asbestos, if used properly, is not dangerous, which is exactly what Dow Chemical says about 2,4-D. If used properly, it's not dangerous. We've got to rise above that, and we've also got to be able to get the best science, and I thank you for doing that tonight, for giving us the best science on which we can take decisions in the public interest. Thank you.
I would just like to point out, I don't know if it's true here in Canada, but in the United States, we had 26 scientists who work in the public sector on genetically engineered crops that actually work on corn, who sent a letter to the EPA saying, we cannot do our safety assessments, we can't do research on these crops because we have to sign contracts with the companies, and they dictate what kind of work we can do and can't do. And so we can't do proper assessments with non-patented, non-engineered crops. Any scientist that wants to do research on them, they go out and buy them. And then they can do their research. With these things, the scientists cannot do the research unless they get approval from the companies. And so that's why you had 26 scientists in the public sector saying we can't do our research because of the what these corporations are doing, the restrictions they're putting on us, and they had to be anonymous, most of them, because they feared retaliation. So that's one issue, and there have been actually 2 articles in Nature and in Nature Biotechnology in the last 2 months that have actually talked about how scientists have been gone after if they find even the slightest adverse effects, how they're gone after by other scientists in the companies, and also with suppression of information. And I'd also like to point out that all these herbicide-tolerant crops has led to a huge increase in weeds that are resistant to glyphosate, and in the U.S., just within the last 2 months, there has been approval, there has been submissions for new varieties of corn that are engineered to be resistant to dicamba and 2,4-D because glyphosate is losing its effectiveness. So 2,4-D is indeed coming back, and there's been dramatic increases in atrazine use as well, and both atrazine and 2,4-D are not benign products. They are very problematic and very toxic. So some of the things that these crops were designed to get to replace, to use more benign chemicals like glyphosate to replace the 2,4-Ds and the atrazines and dicamba, now we're seeing that those crops, the 2,4-D, the part of Agent Orange, is now coming back. The non-engineered near isolines often are not for sale, and a number of farmers in the U.S. have complained that if they want, for example, for corn, the best genetics for their area, they can only get that in the engineered varieties. Another quick example for soybeans is there's a new trait, the Vistiv trait for low linolenic acid, so you can create trans fat-free oil from these soybeans, which is what everybody wants. That trait was developed via conventional breeding, not genetic engineering. The only way soybean farmers can get that is in Roundup-ready varieties. So the choice is not really out there. They try to say about how all these farmers want these products when the reality is they're not being given a choice. So if the farmers want the best genetics, they have to get the engineered stuff because the near isolines are not available, and that is actually causing a problem for farmers that are trying to find non-engineered soybeans or non-engineered corn or other things. So this notion that all these farmers want these products, some of them do, but a lot of them are being coerced because they're not being given free choice.
Yeah, I certainly recognize that, and it's also true that the first generation of GM traits were voluntarily adopted by many farmers who saw advantages in terms of being able to spray on weekends and whatever because they're working full-time jobs. There's a whole set of circumstances that have led to the adoption of the GM crops. And so I think that does need to be taken into account. In terms of Shiv's question, Are there yield advantages? Well, when the BT cotton first came out, there were huge problems with insect resistance to the insecticides at the time, and so initially BT cotton was leading to yield improvements in the U.S. We moved from a chemical treadmill to a gene treadmill potentially, but again, that's the picture under which some of these crops were adopted. One of the things I just want to say in relation to Phil McDonald's comments, and I certainly appreciate that the CFIA has people who have been looking at these products and have done some assessment. And the problem is us, the outside world, being able to know what's going on. At least that's part of the problem. And that's on two levels. That's the public, in terms of the 2 or 3 paragraphs that CFIA has on the website. And that's also in terms of then the scientific community. And I know that gets complicated because of the confidential business information, but for example, I didn't know what the CFIA used for its decision, so I had the EPA decision document of 17 pages and sent that to a couple of the Royal Society scientists and said, what do you think? And they said, well, some of the conclusions seem reasonable based on the data that they had, which was obviously industry data, and we can't see that data, and we don't know. So maybe these were good decisions based within a narrow set of parameters, but we just don't know. So it's on those two levels of the wider scientific community confidence and then the public confidence. And I guess we're about to have another CFIA person at the microphone. Can you tell us what's the roadblock to giving us more information?
Yeah, we did close the mics in order to have the final comments. So that was your concluding remarks, Peter. Okay. Sorry if that wasn't clear. And I know that there's a lot of detail that could yet be discussed, and there's been questions that are opened up that I'm sure there are responses to. But I think we, in the interest of time too, we really do need to conclude. One more? Okay, certainly. Well, the will of the room, absolutely. I'm just conscious that it's the time. Please, Krista, go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity, Lucy. I'm sorry I misheard that the mics have been closed, and I appreciate the introduction, Peter, because I did want to address the transparency issue in my comments today. And what I wanted to say is that as a civil servant, I absolutely understand it's my responsibility to listen to all points of view, and CFIA is here tonight to listen to the discussion. And in the area of transparency, it's absolutely something that's it's important, and it's an area we've tried to improve. After the 2001 Royal Society report, for instance, we did initiate a notice of submission program by which it provides an opportunity for public comment on products that have been submitted into the regulatory system for review. Can we improve further? Absolutely. We do have constraints around the legislation in Canada, the Access to Information Act and the Privacy Act, and we have to operate within those constraints. But there are channels and processes to get information above and beyond what's published on our website. And if anyone has questions about how to do that, if anyone would like to know where to direct questions about the safety of these products and about the regulatory system for biotech in Canada, please come approach me after the meeting.
Thank you very much. And before I thank the panelists, finally, I'd like to thank you all for your willingness to stay into the evening beyond the time we said, and for the participation and questions. As you can see, there's a great deal of questions, discussion, and debate that can happen given a forum, and certainly that's what we hope to encourage further. I'd like to thank all 3 panelists very much for joining us and contributing their expertise.